What would you do if you gave your family over $300,000 across 6 years, only to have them slam the door in your face when you lost everything in a fire? That's exactly what happened to me. And what I did next shocked everyone who thought they knew me. I'm Marissa Scott, and I'm 29 years old. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was running a successful online coaching business from my downtown Cleveland apartment, helping entrepreneurs scale their companies from zero to six figures. My clients were thriving. My income was steady, and on paper, my life looked perfect. But here's what nobody saw behind the Instagram posts and LinkedIn success stories. For 6 straight years, I'd been carrying my entire family on my back financially. 6 years! Let that sink in for a moment. Every month, like clockwork, I'd transfer $2,000 to cover my parents' mortgage, another $800 for utilities, $500 here, $1,000 there for whatever crisis my siblings had gotten themselves into this time. My older brother Jake, I funded his 3 failed business ventures to the tune of $45,000. My sister Emily's dream wedding, $12,000 from my savings account. And don't even get me started on Mia, my parents' new stepdaughter, who somehow convinced me to bankroll her multi-level marketing schemes. I told myself it was temporary. Family helps family, right? That's what good daughters do. They sacrifice. They give until it hurts. They put everyone else's needs before their own dreams. But you know what's funny about being the family ATM? Nobody ever says thank you. They just expect the next withdrawal. I was so busy keeping everyone else afloat that I never learned how to swim myself. I lived in a studio apartment while paying for my parents' 4-bedroom house. I drove a 7-year-old Honda while my sister cruised around in the BMW I helped finance. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years because every spare dollar went to someone else's emergency. And the crazy part, I thought this was love. I thought this was what family meant. Until the night, everything changed. It was April 15th. I remember the date because I'd just finished filing my taxes, realizing I'd given away almost $60,000 that year alone. I was working late in my home office, reviewing client proposals on my laptop when I smelled something burning. At first, I thought it was just my neighbor cooking dinner, but the smell got stronger, thicker. And then I heard the sirens. I opened my apartment door to a wall of black smoke. The building was on fire and it was spreading fast. I had maybe 2 minutes to grab whatever I could before the firefighters forced everyone out. You know what? I saved my laptop. One change of clothes, my phone charger, and a small frame photo of my family from last Christmas, the one where everyone's smiling, like we're the perfect American family. I stood on the street at 2 in the morning, watching 6 years of building my life go up in flames. My equipment, my furniture, my clothes, my books, everything I'd worked for. Gone. The Red Cross put me up in a hotel for 3 nights. 3 nights to figure out where to go, what to do, how to rebuild from nothing. My insurance would eventually cover some of it, but that process would take weeks, maybe months. I had friends, sure, but nobody with a spare bedroom long term. So I did what any daughter would do in a crisis. I called my family. My mom answered on the 4th ring, sounding annoyed that I'd woken her up. When I explained what happened, her first response wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "Thank God you're safe." It was, "Well, what do you want us to do about it?" I asked if I could stay in my old bedroom for a few weeks, just until I found a new place. There was this long pause. Then she said she'd have to talk to my dad and get back to me. Get back to me? Like I was asking for a business loan, not emergency shelter from the daughter who'd been paying their bills for 6 years. But I was desperate, so I drove over anyway the next morning. I still had my key. I figured once they saw me standing there with everything I owned in 2 garbage bags, their hearts would soften. Family takes care of family. Right. I walked through that front door, the door I'd been paying for, into the living room, with the furniture I'd helped buy, and called out, "Mom, Dad, it's me." And that's when I heard laughing from the kitchen. Not the warm, welcoming kind, the cruel kind. Mia appeared in the doorway, my parents' 22-year-old stepdaughter, the one I'd been supporting for 2 years, even though she'd never once called me her sister. She looked me up and down, taking in my singed hair and the garbage bags in my hands, and she actually giggled. "Oh my God," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "What happened to you? You look like a homeless person." My parents came out of the kitchen, and instead of rushing to hug me, instead of asking if I was hurt, they just stood there, watching, waiting to see what I'd say. I explained about the fire, about losing everything, about needing somewhere to stay. And Mia, this girl who'd never paid rent in her life, who'd never held a job for more than 3 months, who'd been living off my generosity for 2 years, looked me dead in the eye and said the words that changed everything. "This isn't a charity house, Marissa. Figure it out." And my parents, they said nothing. Nothing. That was the moment I realized the truth that had been staring me in the face for 6 years. I wasn't their daughter, I was their bank account, and now that I was broke and needy, I was just an inconvenience. I stood there in that house I'd been paying for, looking at the family I'd been supporting, and something inside me broke. Not my heart. That had been breaking slowly for years. Something deeper. Something fundamental. My illusions. I turned around, walked out that door, and spent that night sleeping in my car, in a Walmart parking lot. And as I lay there in my back seat, using my jacket as a pillow, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done. Done being the family ATM. Done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. Done sacrificing my life for people who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. The next morning, I would start cutting them off. All of them. Completely. But that's just the beginning of this story. To understand how I got to that moment, sleeping in my car, after losing everything, you need to know where this all started. Because the patterns were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to see them. I grew up in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street in Cleveland. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class family. Dad worked, Mom stayed home with us kids. We had family dinners and Christmas mornings and summer barbecues. But behind closed doors, money was always the monster in the room that nobody wanted to talk about. My father, Tom, was what you'd politely call a career explorer. In less polite terms, he couldn't hold a job to save his life. Construction worker, insurance salesman, restaurant manager, security guard, delivery driver. By the time I turned 18, he'd had 14 different jobs. 14. I counted them on my bedroom wall like other kids count down to Christmas. Every few months, it was the same cycle. Dad would come home with this defeated look on his face, and Mom would start doing that thing where she'd slam cabinet doors just a little too hard while making dinner. Jake and Emily would disappear to their rooms, but I always stayed. Someone had to witness the financial autopsy. "It wasn't working out," Dad would say, like getting fired was just one of those things that happened to him, like catching a cold. "What are we supposed to do now, Tom?" Mom would ask, her voice getting that shrill edge that meant we were about to have another bills on the kitchen table crisis meeting. And my mother, Linda, God love her, had a shopping addiction that made my father's job hopping look like a minor character flaw. She was the queen of justification. Every purchase was an investment, or a necessity, or on sale, so really we're saving money. I remember being 12 years old watching her unpack 5 bags from Target, explaining to my dad how buying 3 different sets of throw pillows was actually smart budgeting because they were seasonal and she got them half off. Meanwhile, I knew we were behind on the electric bill because I'd seen the pink shutoff notice on the counter. But here's the thing about families in financial chaos. Someone always becomes the responsible one. Someone always steps up to be the adult when the actual adults are too busy blaming each other or making excuses. In our house, that someone was me. By 13, I was clipping coupons and comparing grocery store prices. By 14, I was the one who made sure we had enough milk for the week and reminded Mom to pay the water bill before they turned it off. By 15, I got my first job at a local diner, ostensibly to save for college, but really because I was tired of eating ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights a week. My older brother Jake took a completely different approach to our family's dysfunction. He checked out, mentally, emotionally, financially. Jake was the golden boy who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, even when he was doing absolutely everything wrong. In high school, Jake was the kid who threw the parties when our parents were out of town. He was the one who got suspended for fighting, who crashed dad's truck senior year, who barely graduated with a 2.1 GPA. But somehow, every one of his failures was either someone else's fault or just Jake being Jake. Boys mature later, Mom would say when Jake got arrested for underage drinking. He's just finding himself, she'd explain when he dropped out of community college after one semester. He's an entrepreneur, she'd claim when he quit his third job in 6 months to start selling something called premium water door to door. Jake had this gift for making his problems sound like opportunities, and his failures sound like the world just wasn't ready for his genius yet, and my parents bought every word of it. Then, there was Emily, who was 2 years younger than me, but somehow managed to be the most expensive member of our family. Emily was the princess who never learned that money doesn't grow on trees, because in our house, somehow, it always magically appeared for whatever she wanted. Dance classes, cheerleading uniforms, makeup clothes, a car for her 16th birthday, even though we were behind on the mortgage payments. Emily didn't ask for things. She expected them, and she always got them. She's at such an important age, Mom would say, maxing out another credit card for Emily's homecoming dress. We can't let her feel different from the other girls. But here's what really gets me. While Emily was getting everything handed to her and Jake was getting endless chances to figure his life out, I was working 2 jobs my junior year of high school. I was at the diner until 11 p.m. on school nights, then babysitting the neighbors' kids on weekends, saving every penny for college because nobody was going to pay my way. And when I'd come home exhausted, smelling like French fry grease with homework still to do, my parents would actually praise me for being so independent and responsible. Like my work ethic was a personality trait instead of a survival skill they'd forced me to develop. Marissa doesn't need help like the others, Dad would say. She's got her head on straight. What he really meant was, Marissa will figure it out herself so we don't have to worry about her. I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA, a college acceptance letter, and exactly $7,400 in savings from 2 years of working every spare hour. Jake graduated 3 months late with no plans and no savings. Emily was a sophomore getting straight C's and spending her allowance on whatever caught her eye that week. Guess which one of us got the family celebration dinner? College was supposed to be my escape. I got into Ohio State with a partial academic scholarship, and I thought maybe, finally, I could just focus on being a student. I could join clubs, make friends, date. Do all the normal college things I'd been too tired and too worried about money to do in high school. But 3 weeks into my freshman year, Mom called crying. Dad had lost another job this time for showing up late too many times, and they were 2 months behind on the house payment. Jake had racked up $800 in credit card debt buying supplies for his latest business idea, something involving homemade candles that he was sure would make him rich. Emily needed money for new winter clothes because she'd outgrown everything from last year. "We just need a little help to get back on our feet," Mom said through tears. "Just until your father finds something steady." I was 18 years old, living in a dorm room smaller than my childhood closet, eating mac and cheese for the 3rd night in a row because my meal plan was the cheapest one available. But I heard my mother crying, and I couldn't say no. I took out a student loan for an extra $3,000 that semester. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they'd pay me back once Dad got settled in a new job. I told myself that helping family was worth going a little deeper into debt. I was so naive that $3,000 became $6,000 the next semester, then $8,000, then $12,000. By my sophomore year, I was working 25 hours a week at a campus coffee shop on top of my full course load, sending home whatever I could spare, and watching my student loan balance grow like a tumor. But you know what? I was learning not just from my classes, but from watching other students, successful students, figure out how to make money while they were still in school. I started noticing patterns in the kids who seemed to have it all figured out. Some of them had online businesses, others did freelance work, a few were already building their personal brands on social media. They weren't just surviving college, they were thriving. So I started studying them the way I studied for my business classes. I learned about digital marketing, about building an online presence, about finding clients and delivering value. By my junior year, I was offering social media management services to local businesses. By senior year, I was making more from my side business than I was from my campus job. And here's the crazy part. Even as I was building something real, something that could actually support me after graduation, my family saw it as just another source of emergency funding. Marissa's doing so well with her little computer business. Mom would tell people like it was a hobby instead of the thing that was going to change my life. When I graduated in 2021, I had 2 job offers from marketing firms in Columbus and Cleveland. Good jobs, decent salaries, benefits, the whole traditional career path. But I also had something else. I had clients who were begging me to work with them full time. I had a waiting list of businesses who wanted to hire me. I had the foundation of something that could be huge. So I took the biggest risk of my life. I turned down both job offers and went all in on my own business. My parents thought I'd lost my mind. "You're throwing away your education," Dad said. "What if it doesn't work out?" Mom worried. "You should take the safe job," Emily advised, like she'd ever had to make a decision more complicated than choosing between 2 restaurant entrees. But Jake, surprisingly, was supportive. "Follow your dreams, sis," he said. "I totally get it. That's exactly what I'm doing with my new crypto trading strategy." By 25, I was running a 6-figure coaching business, helping other entrepreneurs build and scale their companies. I had clients across the country, a waiting list for my services, and enough income to live comfortably while saving for my future. I also had a family who saw my success as the solution to all their ongoing problems. And that's when the real financial bleeding started. Because once they knew I could help, they expected me to help. With everything. Always. The worst part, I wanted to help. I wanted to be the daughter who could fix things, who could make their stress go away, who could finally earn the love and approval I'd been chasing my whole life. I thought if I could just give enough, sacrifice enough, prove my worth enough, they'd finally see me as more than just the responsible one. They'd see me as the daughter who saved them. But you can't buy love, and you definitely can't buy respect. I was about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. The financial support started small. That's how these things always begin, isn't it? Just a little help here and there, nothing that feels like it's going to swallow your life whole. Year 1 of my business was incredible. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined possible, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe financially. I had my own apartment, I was building my savings, and I was actually enjoying the fruits of all those years of working multiple jobs and sacrificing everything for my education. But that Christmas, Mom called with just a tiny favor to ask. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage. Dad had been working construction, but the winter season was slow, and Mom had overspent on Christmas presents again. The bank was sending threatening letters, and they were terrified of losing the house. "We just need $10,000 to catch up," Mom said, her voice breaking. "I know it's a lot, but you're doing so well, and we raised you in this house." It would break my heart to lose it. $10,000. I remember staring at my laptop screen, looking at my business bank account, calculating whether I could afford it. Technically, yes, I could cover it without going into debt myself. But that was my emergency fund. That was my security blanket. "We'll pay you back as soon as your father gets steady work again," she promised. "This is just temporary." So I did it. I transferred $10,000 to my parents' account and watched my savings balance drop by half. But you know what? It felt good. It felt like I was finally in a position to help, to be the hero who saved the family home. I should have known better. Heroes don't get happy endings in real life. They just get asked to save the day again, and again, and again. Year 2 was when I learned that temporary is a very flexible concept in my family's vocabulary. Dad did find steady work, actually, a good construction job with benefits and overtime opportunities. But instead of using that income to pay me back, they seemed to view my contribution as having solved their money problems permanently. Why save for emergencies when Marissa's there to handle them? In March, Emily totaled her car hitting a deer on Route 77. Instead of filing an insurance claim or figuring out how to get a loan, the family consensus was that I should just buy her a replacement. "You can afford it," Dad said, like that was a reasonable argument for why I should spend $15,000 on my sister's transportation. "Emily needs a car for her job," Mom added, even though Emily was working part-time at a boutique and spent most of her paycheck on clothes and makeup. But the real manipulation came from Emily herself. She didn't ask. She didn't beg. She just started talking about how she'd have to quit her job and how that would mean she couldn't help with household expenses anymore, and how Mom and Dad were already struggling. "I guess I'll just have to take the bus," she said with this martyred sigh. "It's only a 2-hour commute each way. I'm sure I can make it work." So I bought Emily a car, not a used Honda like I'd been driving, not a basic reliable vehicle that would get her from point A to point B. Emily had done her research and found a 2-year-old Nissan Altima with leather seats and a sunroof that she absolutely loved. $15,300. Gone. But wait, it gets better. 2 weeks after I bought Emily her dream car, Jake called with his latest business venture. He'd discovered dropshipping and was convinced he was going to be the next e-commerce millionaire. "I just need some startup capital," he explained. $7,000 for inventory and marketing. I've got it all figured out, Marissa. This is going to be huge." "What kind of products are you selling?" I asked. "Fitness accessories, resistance bands, yoga mats, water bottles. The health and wellness market is exploding right now." Jake had done approximately zero market research, had no business plan, and had never successfully run any kind of business before. But he was so excited, so confident, and my parents were so proud of him for finally finding his passion. "You should support your brother," Mom said when I hesitated. "Family investments are the best investments." I gave Jake $7,000. His dropshipping business lasted 3 months before he ran out of inventory money and lost interest. I never saw a penny back. Year 3 is when things got really expensive because that's when Emily announced her engagement to her boyfriend Marcus, and somehow that became my financial responsibility too. Marcus was a nice enough guy, worked as a teacher, made a decent living. But Emily had Pinterest-level wedding dreams on a teacher's salary budget, and guess who was expected to bridge that gap? "We're not asking for much," Emily said during our family dinner where she ambushed me with wedding planning details. "Just help with some of the bigger expenses, the venue, the dress, maybe the honeymoon." Some of the bigger expenses. Right. The venue Emily had her heart set on was a lakefront resort that charged $8,000 just for the reception space. Her dream dress was $2,200 from a boutique in downtown Cleveland, and the honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Italy that would cost another $12,000. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event," Mom said, already tearing up. "We want Emily to have the perfect wedding." "Marcus's family's contributing too," Dad added, though their contribution turned out to be paying for the flowers and the photographer. I ended up spending $26,000 on Emily's wedding. $26,000. That was more than most people make in a year, and I spent it on one day that wasn't even about me. But here's the thing that really stung. At the wedding reception during the toasts, Emily thanked everyone who had made the day possible. She thanked Mom and Dad for raising her. She thanked Marcus's parents for welcoming her into the family. She thanked her bridesmaids for their support. She never mentioned me. Not once. When I brought it up later, Emily looked genuinely confused. "But your family," she said. "I don't need to thank family for helping family." That's when I realized that somewhere along the way, My financial support had stopped being seen as generosity and started being seen as obligation. Year 4 was the year of medical bills because Dad decided to have a heart attack right around tax season. Don't get me wrong, I was terrified when I got the call that Dad was in the hospital. I dropped everything and rushed to be there. Sat in that waiting room for 6 hours while they ran tests and figured out what was wrong. I was relieved when the doctor said it was a mild heart attack and that he'd be fine with some lifestyle changes and medication. But then came the bills. Even with insurance, the hospital stay the tests, the cardiac catheterization, and the follow-up appointments added up to $18,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. We just don't have that kind of money, Mom said, spreading the bills across my childhood kitchen table like she was dealing tarot cards predicting financial doom. What are we supposed to do? Dad asked, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. What were we supposed to do? We were supposed to set up a payment plan with the hospital. We were supposed to negotiate with the billing department. We were supposed to explore financial assistance programs. But those options required effort and patience and possibly some uncomfortable conversations with strangers. It was easier to just ask Marissa to write a check. So I paid Dad's medical bills, $18,700. Because what was I going to do? Let my father's credit get ruined over medical debt? But that wasn't the end of year 4's expenses. While I was handling Dad's heart attack aftermath, Mom decided it was the perfect time to confess that she'd maxed out 3 credit cards and was drowning in minimum payments. I was stress spending because of your father's health scare, she explained, as if that made charging $6,000 at Target and Macy's somehow reasonable. I can't sleep at night knowing we owe all this money, she said, crying real tears that I knew were genuine, even though the debt was entirely self-inflicted. Another $6,000. Gone. Year 5 brought a new character into our family financial drama. Mia, my parents' new stepdaughter from Dad's brief marriage to a woman named Carol who had lasted exactly 14 months before realizing what she'd signed up for. Mia was 21, charming in that manipulative way that some people perfect by the time they're old enough to vote, and she had big dreams that required other people's money to achieve. I'm starting my own business, Mia announced at our first family dinner together. It's a health and wellness company with amazing products and an incredible compensation plan. Red flags. So many red flags. But my family was impressed by Mia's enthusiasm and her slick presentation about financial freedom and passive income. Mia is going to be so successful, Mom gushed. She's got such a good head for business. What Mia had was a good head for multi-level marketing schemes and a complete lack of shame about hitting up her new family members for investment opportunities. I just need $5,000 for my starter inventory and marketing materials, Mia explained to me privately after dinner. This company is going to change my life, Marissa. I can feel it. I tried to explain that MLMs have a 99% failure rate. I tried to show her the math on why the compensation structure was designed to benefit people at the top, not newcomers at the bottom. I tried to be the voice of reason. But Mia had already convinced my parents that this was her big break, and they were pressuring me to support her dreams, the same way they'd pressured me to support Jake's endless business ventures. She's family now, Mom said, and family helps family. So I gave Mia $5,000 to buy inventory for her essential oils and weight loss supplements business. Shocking, absolutely no one, except my family, she made exactly 0 sales and quit after 4 months. But Mia wasn't done. 6 months later, she was back with a new crisis. She'd moved in with a boyfriend who turned out to be unemployed and unreliable, and now she couldn't make rent. I just need $2,000 to cover this month and the security deposit for a new apartment, she said. I promise. I'll pay you back as soon as I get settled. $2,000 became $3,000 when she needed help with moving expenses. $3,000 became $4,000 when she needed furniture for the new place. And $4,000 became $5,000 when her car broke down and she needed transportation to get to her new job. By the end of year 5, I'd given Mia over $15,000 total. She'd paid back exactly zero. But here's what really got to me about Mia. Unlike the rest of my family, who at least pretended to feel bad about constantly needing financial help, Mia acted like my support was owed to her. Like I was lucky to have the opportunity to invest in her future. "You're so good at making money," she'd say. "This is probably nothing to you." Nothing to me. As if working 70-hour weeks to build my business was effortless. As if the money I'd earned through years of sacrifice and stress was just monopoly money I could throw around without consequence. Year 6 was when I finally started keeping track of the numbers, because by then the amounts were getting so large that I couldn't pretend this wasn't affecting my own life anymore. Jake's second business venture, a food truck that he abandoned after 3 months, $12,000. Emily's master's degree program that she decided she wasn't passionate about after one semester, $8,000. Dad's dental work that insurance didn't cover $4,000. Mom's emergency roof repair that turned into a full kitchen renovation, $15,000. Mia's third apartment move and her investment in a friend's photography business, $7,000. 3 separate, small loans to cover various utility bills, car repairs, and medical copays, $6,000. By April of year 6, I sat down with a calculator and added up everything I'd given my family since starting my business. The number was so staggering that I had to check it 3 times. $327,000. $327,000 of my money, my work, my sacrifice handed over to people who had never once asked me what I needed, or what I wanted, or what my own dreams were. Do you know what $327,000 could have bought me a house? A really nice house with a mortgage payment lower than what I was paying in rent. Or a smaller house that I could have owned outright, free and clear. It could have been my retirement fund invested properly, growing for the next 30 years, until I could actually stop working if I wanted to. It could have been travel experiences, adventures. It could have been going back to school for something I was passionate about. It could have been starting a second business or expanding the one I had. It could have been my freedom. Instead, it was gone. All of it. Spent on other people's mistakes, other people's dreams, other people's refusal to live within their means or plan for their futures. And what did I have to show for it? A studio apartment I couldn't afford to upgrade because I was too busy paying for everyone else's upgrades. A 7-year-old car because I couldn't justify buying something nicer when my sister was driving the BMW I'd helped finance. A non-existent social life because I was too exhausted from working constantly to maintain the income level necessary to support 6 adults. I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. I hadn't been on a date in 8 months. I hadn't even bought myself new clothes in so long that my work wardrobe was starting to look shabby compared to the outfits Emily posted on Instagram, outfits bought with the allowance my parents could afford to give her because I was covering their mortgage. But you know what? The worst part was, even after giving them over $300,000, I still wasn't enough. I still wasn't the daughter they were proud of at family gatherings. I still wasn't the one they bragged about to their friends. I was just the reliable one. The one who would always figure it out, always step up, always sacrifice a little more. Until the night of the fire, when I needed them to step up for me just once, and they couldn't be bothered. That's when I realized that all those years of giving had bought me exactly nothing. No love, no respect, no security, no peace of mind. Just the privilege of being treated like a bank account with legs. And I was done being their ATM. So there I was at the end of year 6, finally understanding the true cost of my generosity. $327,000 later, and I was more trapped than ever. But I kept telling myself that things would change. That eventually, my family would recognize what I'd sacrificed for them. That eventually, the financial emergencies would stop, and I could start living for myself. I had no idea that in 3 weeks, I'd lose everything and discover just how little my years of sacrifice actually meant to the people I'd been supporting. April 15th started like any other day. I was in my home office, which was really just the corner of my studio apartment, where I'd set up my desk, my computer, my ring light for client calls, and all the equipment that made my business possible. I'd been working since 7 that morning, back-to-back coaching sessions with the clients across 3 time zones. My last call of the day was with Sarah Chen, a client who'd become a friend over the past year. Sarah was launching her own marketing consultancy and had been working with me to develop her business strategy. We just finished going over her Q2 goals when she said something that stuck with me. "You know what I love about you, Marissa? You've built this incredible business, but you still make time for everyone in your life. You're always talking about helping your family, supporting your siblings. It's really beautiful how generous you are." I remember feeling this weird mix of pride and exhaustion when she said that. Pride because, yes, I was generous. I was the daughter who always came through. But also exhaustion because I was starting to realize that being the generous one was becoming the only identity I had left. After the call, I stayed at my desk to catch up on some admin work. Client invoices, scheduling, responding to emails. It was almost 11 p.m. when I finally looked up from my laptop and realized I was hungry. I'd worked through dinner again, something that had become a habit, because I was always trying to squeeze in one more billable hour to cover one more family expense. I was heating up leftover takeout in my tiny kitchen when I smelled something that didn't belong, something acrid and sharp that made my nose wrinkle. At first, I thought it was just my food, getting a little too crispy in the microwave, but the smell got stronger. Then I heard shouting from somewhere in the building, muffled voices, urgent and panicked. I opened my apartment door and was hit with a wall of smoke so thick I could barely see the hallway. The building was on fire. I don't remember making a conscious decision about what to grab. Training kicks in during emergencies, I guess, and my training was to protect my business above everything else. I stuffed my laptop into its bag, grabbed my phone and charger, threw a change of clothes into a grocery bag, and snatched that framed family photo from my nightstand. Then I ran. By the time I made it to the street, fire trucks were already arriving. I stood there with about 20 other residents, all of us in various states of undress and shock, watching orange flames eat through the windows of the building that had been home for 3 years. "Did everyone make it out?" I heard a firefighter asking. "I think so," someone answered. "The alarms went off early. We all had time." We'd all had time to escape with our lives, but that was about it. I watched my bedroom window glow like a jack-o'-lantern and knew that everything else I owned was gone. My furniture, my clothes, my books, my kitchen supplies, my bathroom stuff, my seasonal decorations, the little things you accumulate over the years that make a place feel like home. All of it gone. But worse than the material stuff was watching my office burn. That corner of my apartment represented 6 years of building something from nothing. The investment in good equipment, the carefully arranged setup for client calls, the filing system where I kept important documents, the external hard drive with all my business files. I had backups in the cloud for most things, thank God, but standing there watching the flames, I felt like I was watching my entire life disappear. A Red Cross volunteer approached me around 2 in the morning with a clipboard and a kind smile. "Ma'am, we've arranged temporary housing at the Hampton Inn for displaced residents. You'll have a room for 3 nights while you figure out your next steps. Do you have family or friends you can stay with after that?" Family. Of course I had family. Family that I'd been supporting for 6 years. Family who lived in a 4-bedroom house that I'd helped save from foreclosure. Family who would obviously welcome me with open arms during the worst crisis of my adult life. Right. The hotel room was small and sterile, but it was safe and warm, and it had Wi-Fi, which meant I could start the process of dealing with insurance and trying to salvage my business. I spent the first day on the phone with my insurance company, documenting everything I could remember losing and reaching out to clients to let them know what had happened. Everyone was incredibly understanding. Sarah Chen immediately offered to let me stay at her place for as long as I needed. My client, David Rodriguez, sent me a care package with basic supplies and a note saying not to worry about our scheduled sessions until I was ready. It was amazing how quickly people who had known me for less than 2 years stepped up to help while I was dreading the conversation I needed to have with the family I'd been supporting for 6 years. I called Mom on day 2. "Oh my God, Marissa, are you okay?" she said when I told her about the fire. "That's terrible. Thank goodness you weren't hurt." "I'm fine physically," I said, "but I lost everything. The insurance will cover some of it eventually, but it's going to take weeks or months to process. I'm in a hotel right now, but I can only stay here through tomorrow." There was a pause, a long pause. "Well, what are you going to do?" she asked. What was I going to do? I was going to ask my family, the family I'd given over $300,000 to, if I could sleep in my childhood bedroom for a few weeks while I found a new apartment and rebuilt my life. "I was hoping I could stay with you and Dad for a little while," I said. "Just until I get back on my feet." Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh, honey, that's complicated right now. We have Mia living here and the house is just so full. And your father hasn't been feeling well since his heart attack. The stress of having extra people around might not be good for him." Extra people. I was extra people. "Mom, it's me. It's your daughter. I just lost everything in a fire." "I know, sweetheart, and I feel terrible about it. But I need to talk to your father and see what we can work out. Can you give us a day to figure something out?" A day. I needed to check out of the hotel in 18 hours, and my mother needed a day to figure out whether she could spare a bedroom for her daughter who had been paying her mortgage for 6 years. "Sure," I said, because what else could I say? "I'll wait to hear from you." But I didn't wait. I couldn't. I packed up my 2 bags of belongings and drove to the house on the Maple Street, the house I'd saved from foreclosure, and let myself in with the key I'd had since high school. "Mom, Dad," I called out. "It's me." I heard voices from the kitchen, laughter and conversation. Normal family sounds that made me feel hopeful for the first time since the fire. This was going to be okay. Once they saw me standing there with everything I owned in 2 garbage bags, once they realized how bad things were, their hearts would kick in, and they'd make room for me. I walked toward the kitchen, already planning what I'd say to thank them for taking me in when Mia appeared in the doorway. Mia had been living with my parents for about 8 months at that point, ever since her latest boyfriend disaster. She was 22, but she had this way of looking at the world like it owed her something. Like every inconvenience was a personal attack, and every person who couldn't immediately solve her problems was basically useless. She looked me up and down, taking in my unwashed hair, my clothes that smelled like smoke, the garbage bags in my hands. And then she laughed. Not a surprised laugh or a nervous laugh. A mean laugh. The kind of laugh you hear from bullies in high school movies. "Oh my God," she said loud enough for everyone in the kitchen to hear. "What happened to you? You look like a homeless person." A homeless person. I was literally homeless, standing in the house I'd been paying for, being mocked by someone I'd given thousands of dollars to support. But it got worse. Mom and Dad came out of the kitchen, followed by Jake and Emily, who had apparently stopped by for dinner. A nice family dinner that I hadn't been invited to in the house I'd saved from foreclosure. "Marissa," Dad said, looking uncomfortable, "your mother said you might be stopping by." Might be stopping by, like this was a social visit. I explained about the fire again, about losing everything, about needing somewhere to stay temporarily. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to sound like I was asking for a favor instead of expecting basic human decency from the people who owed me more money than most people make in 5 years. "It would just be for a few weeks," I said, "until I can find a new place and get my insurance settled." That's when Mia spoke up again. "This isn't a charity house, Marissa," she said with this smug little smile. "Maybe you should have bought him insurance or something. Figure it out. This isn't a charity house." Let me repeat that. Mia, who had been living rent-free in my parents' house for 8 months, who had never contributed a dime to household expenses, who was wearing clothes I'd helped pay for and eating food I'd helped buy, told me that the house I'd been supporting for 6 years wasn't a charity. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to correct her, waiting for them to remind Mia that this was their daughter, that I was family, that of course I could stay here during an emergency. They said nothing. Emily looked at her phone. Jake studied his shoes. Mom busied herself wiping down counters that were already clean. Dad cleared his throat like he was going to say something, then didn't, and Mia just stood there smiling like she'd won some kind of contest I didn't know we were having. I just lost everything, I said, my voice starting to crack. Everything I own was in that apartment. My clothes, my furniture, my equipment for work, everything. That sucks, Mia said with all the sincerity of someone commenting on the weather. But that's not really our problem, is it? Our problem. Mia had been part of our family for less than a year and she was already speaking for everyone. I felt something break inside me then. Not my heart that had been cracking for years under the weight of constantly giving and never receiving. Something deeper. Something fundamental. My faith in family. My belief that blood meant something. My hope that years of sacrifice and generosity had earned me a place at the table when I needed it most. I've been supporting this family for 6 years, I said quietly. I've given you hundreds of thousands of dollars. I saved this house from foreclosure. I've paid for cars and weddings, and business ventures, and medical bills, and credit card debt, and rent and emergencies. 6 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. And we appreciate that, Mom said quickly. But no, I interrupted. You don't get to butt me right now. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for a place to sleep for a few weeks after losing everything in a fire. And you're telling me that this house that I saved isn't a charity. The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody defended me. Nobody stepped up. Nobody said, "Of course you can stay here, your family." Mia actually rolled her eyes. "You chose to give us money," she said. "Nobody forced you, and now you want to cash in on some kind of family favor bank. That's not how it works. That's not how it works." This girl who had never worked a day in her life, who had never paid rent, or bought her own groceries, or supported anyone but herself, was lecturing me about how family obligations work. I started crying then. Not pretty tears, not dignified tears. Ugly, broken, exhausted tears that came from 6 years of being taken for granted, and the sudden realization that I'd been living in a fantasy where my generosity meant something. "I need to go," I whispered. Nobody tried to stop me. I walked out of that house, out of the house I'd saved, carrying my 2 garbage bags full of smoke-damaged clothes and whatever dignity I had left. I got in my car and drove to the nearest Walmart parking lot because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I spent that night in my back seat, using my jacket as a pillow and a throw blanket I'd grabbed from the hotel as a cover. It was April, so it wasn't freezing, but it was cold enough that I couldn't really sleep. I just lay there, staring at the dome light of my car, thinking about how I'd gotten to this point. I was 29 years old. I had a successful business, loyal clients, and a healthy bank account. I should have been able to handle a crisis like this. I should have had enough savings to rent a new apartment immediately, to buy whatever I needed to replace what I'd lost, to take care of myself the way I'd been taking care of everyone else for years. But I didn't, because every time I'd tried to build up my own emergency fund, there had been another emergency. Someone else's emergency. Always someone else's crisis that was more important than my security. I'd spent 6 years being the family safety net, and when I finally needed a safety net myself, there was nobody there to catch me. Lying in that Walmart parking lot, listening to the occasional car driving by, and the hum of the streetlights, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done. Done being the responsible one. Done being the family bank. Done setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. If Mia was right, if the house I'd been supporting wasn't a charity, then my bank account wasn't a charity either. As soon as the sun came up, I was going to start cutting them off. All of them. Completely. It was time to save myself for once. I woke up in my car at 6:30 in the morning with a crick in my neck and the absolute clarity that comes from hitting rock bottom. You know that moment when you've been drowning slowly for so long that you don't realize how deep underwater you are until something forces you to fight your way back to the surface. That's where I was. The Walmart parking lot was starting to come alive with early morning shoppers and employees arriving for their shifts. I watched a woman about my age walk past my car carrying a coffee and checking her phone, probably heading to a job where she got to focus on her own life instead of managing everyone else's financial disasters. I wanted to be her. I wanted to be someone whose biggest worry was whether she remembered to set her alarm, not whether her family would respect her enough to offer basic help during a crisis. I drove to a McDonald's, bought a coffee and an Egg McMuffin, and sat in a corner booth with my laptop to start the most important project of my adult life, taking my life back. First, I needed to see the full scope of what I'd been doing to myself financially. I'd calculated bits and pieces before, but sitting there in McDonald's at 7 in the morning, I was going to add up every single penny I'd given my family over the past 6 years. I opened a spreadsheet and started going through my bank statements month by month, year by year. Every transfer to my parents' account for mortgage and utilities. Every check I'd written for Jake's business ventures. Every payment I'd made directly to vendors, for Emily's wedding, Dad's medical bills, Mom's credit cards. The numbers were staggering, but I kept going. I documented everything methodically, creating categories for different types of support. Housing costs, medical expenses, business investments, wedding and events, emergency bailouts, general living expenses. By 9 a.m., I had the complete picture, and it was worse than I'd thought. $327,843. Nearly $330,000 of my money, my work, my life handed over to people who couldn't even offer me a couch to sleep on when I lost everything. But it wasn't just the money. It was 6 years of my time, my energy, my stress. 6 years of saying no to things I wanted, so I could say yes to things other people needed. 6 years of living smaller, so other people could live larger. I sat there staring at that number on my laptop screen, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Pure, clean, righteous anger. Not the frustrated, exhausted anger I'd been carrying around for months. This was different. This was the kind of anger that burns away confusion and guilt and makes everything crystal clear. I opened my banking app and started the process of cutting them off. All of them. Completely. First, I canceled the automatic transfer that sent $2,000 to my parents' account every month. The transfer that had been running for so long it felt like a utility bill. Gone. Then I removed my parents as authorized users on the credit card I'd given them for emergencies. The card they'd somehow managed to put $8,000 on in the past year, mostly for things that definitely weren't emergencies. I closed the joint savings account I'd set up for Jake's business ventures, the one he'd been treating like his personal ATM. I transferred the remaining balance, about $3,000, back to my main account. I canceled the insurance policy I'd been paying on Emily's car. If she wanted car insurance, she could pay for it herself like every other adult in America. I went through every recurring payment, every standing authorization, every financial connection I had to my family's expenses, and I cut them off. One by one. Methodically. Permanently. It took me 2 hours to undo 6 years of financial entanglement, and with each canceled payment, I felt lighter. Like I was surgically removing tumors that had been growing inside my financial life for years. But canceling the payments was just the first step. I needed to make it clear that this wasn't temporary. This wasn't me having a bad day or needing space to recover from the fire. This was permanent. I opened a new document and started writing the most difficult email of my life. Dear Mom, Dad, Jake, Emily, and Mia, I'm writing to inform you that I will no longer be providing financial support to anyone in this family effective immediately. Over the past 6 years, I have given you $327, $843 of my own money to cover mortgages, bills, medical expenses, business ventures, weddings, emergencies, and general living expenses. This support has prevented me from building my own emergency fund, buying my own home, or securing my own financial future. Yesterday, when I lost everything in a fire and asked for temporary housing while I rebuild my life, I was told that your house isn't a charity and that I should figure it out on my own. I have received the message loud and clear. If your home isn't a charity when I need help, then my bank account isn't a charity when you need help. All automatic payments, joint accounts, and financial arrangements between us have been canceled. I will not be covering any future expenses, emergencies, or requests for financial assistance. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Marissa. I read through it 3 times, making sure the tone was firm but not cruel, clear but not vindictive. This wasn't about revenge. This was about boundaries. This was about finally valuing myself enough to stop letting other people treat me like an ATM. I sent the email at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and then I turned my phone on silent and drove to Sarah Chen's house to figure out what came next. Sarah had texted me the night before, asking how I was doing and repeating her offer to let me stay with her while I got back on my feet. Sarah lived in a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in Lakewood, and when I showed up on her doorstep with my 2 garbage bags, she welcomed me like I was family coming home. "I'm so sorry about last night," she said, hugging me before I even made it through the door. "I can't believe your own family wouldn't take you in. That's just unbelievable." Sarah had met my family exactly once at a networking event where I'd introduced them as my proud parents and supportive siblings. She'd been impressed by how close we seemed, how much they talked about my success. She had no idea that behind all that pride was a relationship built entirely on financial transactions. "I don't want to impose," I started to say, but Sarah cut me off. "You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who cares about you. There's a difference." That afternoon, while Sarah was at her own client meetings, I sat in her guest room and watched my phone light up with incoming calls and text messages. I'd turned the sound off, but I could see the notifications piling up on my screen. Mom, Dad, Jake, Emily, even Mia. I let them all go to voicemail. By evening, I had 63 missed calls and 47 text messages. I finally worked up the courage to check them around 8 p.m. after Sarah and I had ordered Chinese takeout and I'd had a glass of wine to steady my nerves. The messages followed a predictable pattern that anyone who's ever set boundaries with manipulative people would recognize. First came the shock and disbelief. "Marissa, what is this email about? Call me immediately." "Mom, are you serious right now? This is insane." "Emily, you can't just cut us off like this. We're family." "Jake." Then came the guilt trips. "Your father is having chest pains because of the stress you're causing." "Is this what you want?" "Mom, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." "Dad, I guess we know what we really mean to you. Money is more important than family." "Emily." Then came the bargaining. "Let's talk about this like adults. We can work something out." "Jake, maybe we can set up a payment plan to pay you back some of what you've given us." Mom, I had no idea you felt this way. Can we please sit down and discuss this?" "Dad." And finally came the threats. "Don't expect us to be here when you change your mind." "Emily, you're making a huge mistake. Family is all you have in this world." "Mom, you'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." "Dad." The most telling message came from Mia. "This is so dramatic. You'll be back in a week begging us to take your money again." Reading through all of those messages, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. Because they proved that I'd made the right decision. Not one of them asked if I was okay after losing everything in the fire. Not one of them acknowledged that maybe they'd been taking advantage of my generosity. Not one of them apologized for turning me away when I needed help. It was all about them, their needs, their feelings, their financial problems that would now be their responsibility to solve. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, seeing me put my phone down. "Free," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in 6 years, I feel completely free. The next few days were a whirlwind of practical decisions and emotional processing. I stayed with Sarah for a week while I looked for a temporary place to live and started the process of rebuilding my business setup. That's when Sarah introduced me to Diana Rodriguez, a graphic designer who ran a shared creative workspace downtown. Diana had heard about my situation through Sarah and offered me something amazing, a desk in her studio space for half the normal rate with flexible terms and no long-term commitment required. "I've been where you are," Diana said when we met. "Not the fire part, but the cutting off toxic family part. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are when nobody else's needs are defining your life." Diana's studio was in a converted warehouse with high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and huge windows that filled the space with natural light. She shared it with 5 other freelancers: a photographer, a web developer, a copywriter, a jewelry maker, and now me. It was the first workspace I'd ever had that was completely mine, with no personal life bleeding into it, no family members calling with emergencies while I was trying to work with the clients. Just clean, professional, creative space where I could focus entirely on building my business. Finding a place to live took a little longer, but Diana connected me with her landlord, Rachel, who owned several rental properties around the city. Rachel had a small one-bedroom apartment that had just become available, and when she heard my story, she offered me a lease with a lower security deposit and flexible move-in terms. "I believe in supporting women who are rebuilding their lives," Rachel said. "You've got steady income and good references. The rest is just paperwork." The apartment wasn't fancy. It was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house with hardwood floors that creaked when you walked on them, and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. But it was mine. Completely, totally mine. No family members with keys. No one else's financial crisis affecting whether I could afford the rent. No one else's drama bleeding into my personal space. The first night I slept in my new apartment on an air mattress because I hadn't had time to buy furniture, yet I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of my own life. The hum of the refrigerator I'd bought. The tick of the clock on the wall. The settling sounds of a building that belonged to someone else, but a space that was entirely mine. It had been 3 weeks since the fire, 3 weeks since I'd lost everything and discovered that my family valued my money more than my well-being. 3 weeks since I'd made the decision to stop setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. My phone had stopped ringing constantly. The angry messages had tapered off to occasional guilt trips that I deleted without reading. My bank account balance was higher than it had been in years, because I wasn't automatically transferring thousands of dollars to other people every month. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was emotional. For 6 years, I'd been carrying the weight of everyone else's problems on my shoulders. Every financial crisis, every poor decision, every consequence of their choices had somehow become my responsibility to fix. Now, lying in my empty apartment on my air mattress, I felt lighter than I had since college. Like I'd been walking around with a 100-pound backpack for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I was 29 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself. My income was mine to spend or save. My time was mine to manage. My energy was mine to invest in my own dreams and goals. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely liberating. Tomorrow, I would start shopping for furniture that I liked, that reflected my taste, that I could afford, because I wasn't subsidizing 4 other adults. I would start planning the business expansion I'd been putting off for years, because I couldn't afford the startup costs. I would start thinking about my own future instead of managing everyone else's present. But tonight, I was just going to lie here in my empty apartment and enjoy the sound of my own life finally lived on my own terms. 6 weeks after cutting off my family, I was sitting in my new apartment when my phone rang with a call I'd been waiting for since the night of the fire. My insurance adjuster finally calling with the settlement amount. "Ms. Scott, I have good news," he said. "Your claim has been approved for the full amount. After your deductible, you'll be receiving a check for $42,800. $42,000! Enough to replace everything I'd lost and then some. But more than that, it was validation that I'd been right to invest in good insurance coverage even when my family used to tease me about being paranoid with money. The check will arrive within 5 business days," he continued. "I'm sorry this took so long, but fires can be complicated claims." When I hung up, I just sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. For the first time since the fire, I was going to have enough money to fully rebuild my life. Not just survive, not just get by, but actually create something better than what I'd had before. The first thing I did was go shopping for new equipment. Not just replacing what I'd lost, but upgrading everything. A new laptop with more processing power, a professional lighting setup for client calls, a high-quality camera for content creation, a printer that could handle all my business needs. For 6 years, I'd been putting off business investments because there was always someone else's crisis that needed funding. Now, walking through Best Buy with a budget of $15,000 for equipment, I felt like a kid in a candy store. "You look happy," the sales associate said as he rang up my new laptop. "I'm rebuilding," I told him. "And this time, I'm building it exactly the way I want it." That's when Diana approached me with an idea that would change everything. "I've been watching you work these past few weeks," she said over coffee one morning at our shared studio space. "Your clients love you, you're incredibly organized, and you have this natural ability to solve problems. I've been thinking about expanding my business, and I think we could make a great partnership." Diana's idea was to create a full-service creative agency that combined her graphic design and print services with my digital marketing and business coaching expertise. We'd share the overhead costs, refer clients to each other, and pool our resources to take on bigger projects. "I've been working alone for 5 years," she said, "and I'm ready to think bigger, but I want to partner with someone I trust, someone who understands what it's like to build a business from scratch." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I had the insurance money to invest in a proper business setup. Diana had an established client base and a great workspace, and together we had complementary skills that could serve a wider range of clients. We spent 3 weeks putting together a business plan, setting up the legal structure, and designing our new brand, Scott and Rodriguez Creative Agency. It had a nice ring to it, but something else was happening during this rebuilding process that was maybe even more important than the business growth. I was starting to really understand the psychological patterns that had led me to give away $300,000 to people who didn't appreciate it. Sarah had been gently suggesting that I might benefit from talking to a therapist about everything I'd been through. At first, I resisted. I felt like I'd already figured out the problem and solved it by cutting off my family. What more was there to talk about? But Sarah persisted. "You've made incredible changes in your external life," she said. "But have you dealt with the internal stuff that made you think it was normal to sacrifice yourself for people who didn't value you?" She was right. I found a therapist named Dr. Martinez who specialized in family dynamics and financial psychology. Our first session was awkward, like most first therapy sessions are. But by the third week, we were digging into patterns I'd never even noticed about myself. "Tell me about the first time you remember feeling responsible for your family's financial problems," Dr. Martinez asked during one session. I told her about being 13 and clipping coupons 14 and worrying about the electric bill 15 and getting a job to help with the groceries. "So you learned very early that your worth in the family was tied to your ability to solve their problems," she reflected. "And when you became successful, that pattern just escalated." She introduced me to a term I'd never heard before: financial enmeshment. It's when family members become so financially intertwined that individual boundaries get lost, and one person's success becomes everyone else's safety net. Healthy families celebrate each other's success, Dr. Martinez explained. Enmeshed families see each other's success as a resource to be managed for the group's benefit. That hit me like a lightning bolt. For 6 years, I'd thought I was being generous. But really, I'd been trapped in a dysfunctional system where my family saw my income as their backup plan, and I'd enabled that by never setting boundaries. The therapy sessions weren't always easy. Some weeks I left feeling worse than when I'd arrived, like Dr. Martinez had stirred up emotions I'd been avoiding for years. But gradually, I started to understand how I'd ended up in that situation, and more importantly, how to make sure I never ended up there again. Or, setting boundaries isn't mean, Dr. Martinez reminded me during one particularly difficult session. It's necessary for healthy relationships. People who love you will respect your boundaries. People who don't respect your boundaries don't actually love you in a healthy way. That was a hard truth to accept, but it was also liberating. For the first time, I had a framework for understanding why cutting off my family had been the right decision, even though it had felt terrible at the time. Meanwhile, my social life was starting to bloom in ways I hadn't experienced since college. Without the constant stress of managing everyone else's financial crises, I had energy for things like accepting dinner invitations, going to networking events, and actually enjoying conversations that weren't about money or family drama. Diana introduced me to her circle of friends, other creative entrepreneurs who were building their own businesses and living their own lives. We'd meet for drinks after work, go to art gallery openings, take weekend trips to explore Ohio's state parks. It was amazing how much mental space I had for friendship. Once I wasn't spending every spare moment worrying about which family member was going to have the next financial emergency. That's how I met Adam. It was at a networking event for local entrepreneurs, the kind of event I'd been avoiding for years, because I was always too tired or too stressed to make small talk with strangers. But Diana convinced me to go, and I'm so glad she did. Adam was there representing his consulting firm, which helped small businesses with financial planning and strategic growth. We ended up talking for an hour about business life goals and dreams. He was funny and thoughtful and genuinely interested in my story. When he asked me out for coffee the following week, I almost said no out of habit. For so long, dating had felt like a luxury I couldn't afford because I was too busy managing everyone else's problems. But then I remembered I was free now, free to make choices based on what I wanted, not what other people needed from me. Our first coffee date turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekend hikes. Weekend hikes turned into planning trips together. Adam was the first person I dated who saw my success as something to celebrate, not something to benefit from. "I love how passionate you are about your work," he told me after I'd been talking about a challenging client project. "You light up when you talk about helping other people build their businesses." It was such a foreign concept to me, someone being attracted to my ambition instead of threatened by it or looking to profit from it. Adam had his own successful business, his own goals, his own financial stability. He didn't need me to solve his problems because he was perfectly capable of handling his own life. About 8 months after cutting off my family, I got a letter in the mail that I wasn't expecting. It was from my father, handwritten on plain white paper with no return address. "Dear Marissa," it began, "I've been thinking about what happened after your fire, and I realize we failed you when you needed us most. I don't have any excuses for how we treated you that night. You had every right to expect better from us, especially after everything you've done for this family over the years. I know you've cut off contact with all of us, and I understand why. I'm not writing to ask you to change your mind or to start supporting us again. I'm writing to tell you that I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I'm sorry it took losing you for me to realize how much we were taking advantage of your generosity. Your mother and I are figuring out how to manage our finances on our own now. It's been difficult, but it's forced us to make changes we should have made years ago. Jake has found steady work and is paying his own way for the first time in his adult life. Emily and Marcus are learning to live within their means. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty or to suggest that you should come back and fix things. I'm telling you because I want you to know that your decision to step back has actually helped all of us grow up. I hope you're happy, sweetheart. You deserve to be happy. Love, Dad. I read that letter 3 times sitting on my couch in my little apartment, and I cried. Not sad tears, but something more complicated. Relief that my father finally understood. Gratitude that he wasn't asking for anything. Sadness for all the years we could have had a healthy relationship if they just respected me as a person instead of seeing me as a resource. I thought about writing back, but I decided not to. Not because I was angry, but because I was at peace. I didn't need to rebuild those relationships to move forward with my life. Some bridges are meant to stay burned, not because you hate what's on the other side, but because you found something better where you are. Today marks exactly 1 year since the fire that changed everything. I'm sitting on a bench at the Rocky River Reservation, looking out over the water, thinking about how much my life has changed in 12 months. My business partnership with Diana has exceeded every expectation we had. We're booked solid through the end of the year, we're hiring our first employee next month, and we're looking at expanding into a larger space downtown. I'm living in a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment that I love, furnished with things I chose because I like them, not because they were the cheapest option available after supporting 6 other adults. I have a savings account with enough money to handle any emergency that comes my way, plus investments that are growing for my future. I'm planning a 2-week vacation to Scotland next spring, the first real vacation I've taken in 7 years. And I have Adam, who just texted me asking if I want to try that new Italian restaurant tonight. Adam, who has never once asked me for money, who splits every bill without making it weird, who builds his own success and celebrates mine. My phone is buzzing with that text from Adam, and I'm smiling as I type back. Yes, absolutely. Can't wait to see you. As I'm getting ready to leave this peaceful spot by the water, I'm thinking about something Dr. Martinez said in one of our last sessions before I graduated from therapy. Sometimes, she said, losing everything is the only way to discover what you actually need. I lost my apartment, my belongings, my equipment, and my family all in the same week. It felt like the end of the world at the time, but what I gained was so much more valuable than what I lost. I gained my freedom. I gained my self-respect. I gained the ability to choose relationships based on love and mutual respect instead of financial obligation. I gained a life that's actually mine. Sometimes losing everything shows you what you truly need. And what I needed wasn't a family who valued my bank account. What I needed was the courage to value myself. Now I have that courage, and I'm never giving it up again. Have you ever had to cut off family members who took advantage of your generosity? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button for more real-life drama that'll make you think twice about family dynamics.